welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. The world might not be paying much attention to Burundi, but it should be, especially the capital, Bujumbura, where civilians have been experiencing relatively peaceful days and terribly violent nights. Our sources in Bujumbura tell us that the post-election violence has escalated to the point that some have been forced to flee in fear of losing their lives. We've also received reports that armed men wearing security forces uniforms are behind the recent attacks which we've seen in recent days. Police are now investigating their identities. 5 prominent people have now been killed, including General Adolphe Nshimirimana, and that was the country's former head of intelligence and an advisor to President Nkurunziza, and he was killed on August the 2nd. Burundi has been in turmoil since April when President Nkurunziza announced he would seek another term, sparking street protests and clashes with security forces that left at least 77 people dead and counting, and drove another 180,000 people across the border. Now let's bring you a timeline of events which have occurred since President Nkurunziza announced his third-term bid. As regards civilians, we've seen protests, we've seen displacements, and also murders. And regarding the political aspects, there has been a violation of the Constitution, the violation of the Arusha peace deal, which ended the war which took place in 2005, and also a failed coup attempt. If we're going to look at the context of elections, it was not observed by the international community due to the conditions at the time, and the credibility of those elections are in questions. As regards political killings, there have been 5 murders and 1 shooting. Thankfully, one of those who were shot survived. Now, as regards press freedom in the country, privately run media is still shut down, and only state-run media has been operating. Well, some people have taken to Twitter in Burundi to give some hate speech. We've got some excerpts of those statements which were made on Twitter. We'll be showing them to you right now. Now, this is coming from Ejon Nduwimana, and he says that Adolphe Nshimirimana's death has heavily united the DD system, and any chance of the Arusha Accord surviving stands at 0. There's more of those excerpts, as you can see right there on your screen, from Kabuso Daniel. We'll also have them displayed on our Twitter page at the end of this bulletin. Well, for more on what's happening in Burundi, we go live to London, where our Africa News analyst, Mr. Warwick Onyema, has been monitoring the situation closely all the way from London. Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for your time again on the program.
It's always nice being with you, Cynthia. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. Now, basically, you predicted the unfortunate events that we're seeing unfold in Burundi. Are you surprised at the extent to which the situation has deteriorated?
Well, it's deteriorated rather quickly, with armed militia on the streets at night, scaring people to stay indoors. It is said that they do this because they don't want witnesses to their attempts to round up opponents to Nkurunziza. So there you have it. It's really an unhappy situation now in which the country is virtually in a state of pre-war chaos.
Look like the formation of a unity government could remain more of a fantasy because some of those prominent individuals from the opposition have been targeted in the past week. My question is, do you think a unity government is still realistic at this point?
I think that's a dead number, quite frankly. I think at the moment people are far too concerned to preserve their livelihoods and their safety. And people have left the country in droves in an attempt really to remain safe and to remain away from the armed militia who seem to be in control of the streets at the moment.
Finally, Mr. Onyema, who do you think can step in? Because it looks as though no country or organization in the international community wants to have a hand in this.
Do you blame them? I mean, here you have Nkurunziza, whose announcement that he wanted to stand for a 3rd term has initiated this latest explosion of violence and flight. He's more or less decided that rather than him to leave being a president, he would rather the whole country collapsed into chaos. He's made that choice, and I can't see anybody wanting to step in at this point to do anything about it, because it's more or less irreversible. What he's decided means that, in fact, this country is going to re-enter civil war, and that seems to be the opinion of people who are resident in Bujumbura.
So what options are left for Burundi at this point?
The only option is for Nkurunziza and his supporters to stand down and allow international mediation. I just don't see them doing it, and I'm afraid that things are going to get worse.
Well, Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for your time. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Cynthia.
Mr. Warwick Onyema, who is an African news analyst speaking to us from London. Still to come on Network Africa. All roads lead to Ethiopia as yet another attempt is made to broker a peace deal that could end the crisis in South Sudan. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now, a crucial meeting is holding in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. It's the fourth attempt to broker a peace deal between the warring factions in South Sudan that could possibly end the crisis. The crisis in the world's newest country began in December of 2013 when President Salva Kiir accused his sacked deputy Riek Machar of plotting a coup against him.
From the onset of the South Sudan crisis, the Intergovernmental Authorities on Development, IGAD, has been mediating peace talks with the view of ending the ongoing conflicts between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and rebel allied with his former deputy, Riek Machar. In the new talks, parties to the South Sudan peace process will deliberate on the compromise agreement put forward for signing by August 17th by the extended IGAD Plus group of regional and international states and organizations. At the opening of the negotiations, the warring side expressed wishes for restoration of peace but accused one another of repeatedly violating ceasefire deals.
These are states that the armed rebellion desperately seeks to take over militarily, and in the single-minded pursuit of this objective, the rebellion has caused us the loss of many precious lives among both the civil population and the military on both sides.
I would like to bring to the attention of the mediators and the South Sudanese stakeholders that I'm negotiating with a government that has lost its legitimacy as of July 8th, 2015. Hence, it cannot continue to claim legitimacy to deserve that special advantage in power sharing.
The cost of this war has been felt the most by the civilians. According to the United Nations, over 2.2 million South Sudanese have become refugees or been displaced. The number of refugees who have fled the country has soared to 730,000, and the humanitarian situation in South Sudan is growing more acute, as 4.6 million people are in need of emergency food aid.
I urge my brothers and sisters, the leadership of South Sudan, to recognize that this is an internal crisis. This is their crisis, and they are the ones who should attend and resolve this crisis. It is not external. We urge you to internalize this crisis and stand for the call of the day.
IGAD believes the South Sudan leaders may face sanctions, including an arms embargo and travel bans if the August 17th deadline is not met.
Now, this is not the first attempt at brokering a peace deal in South Sudan. There have been 4 major attempts so far. The first was on December the 19th of 2013, and then on December the 27th, 2013, then April the 12th, and that which is taking place today. The deadline which has been given for today's meeting is August the 17th, and if not, sanctions could be imposed on the warring factions. Well, in other news, it's been several weeks since President Omar al-Bashir of Sudan attended the African Union Summit in South Africa and left, ridding the International Criminal Court of the chance to arrest him for the war crimes he's accused of committing. In his defense, the South African President, Jacob Zuma, who played host at the time, says the decision to let the Sudanese president evade an arrest warrant and leave the country in June was based on the fact that he was a guest. President Bashir was allowed to leave the AU summit and fly home in defiance of a local court ruling ordering his detention under a warrant from the International Criminal Court.